Welcome into the Baseball Insiders. Enjoy your stay. Kicking off the holiday week, right? Bringing on Robert Murray to start the month of July, which is the month the trade deadline is in. Recapping the weekend in buzz, answering your questions. And yes, we do plan to be back here Wednesday afternoon, not the 4th of July. Spend your 4th of July eating a hamburger. One hamburger. That's all you get. But come join us on Wednesday afternoon to talk trade deadline buzz. Because Robert Murray, thank you for joining me, Fansided's MLB Insider, as you all know, and that's why you are here, because you know that, but I'll say it anyway. As you know, plenty moved over the weekend, plenty to talk about, plenty of questions in the comment section. I'm sure that we will address before the show ends, but good chance things change again over the next 48 hours, wouldn't you say?
I would definitely say so. And I would also say that I would like to confirm Adam's report that we're having our second show of the week on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday morning, depending on where you're at. Shall be good. Happy 4th or happy early 4th to everyone. And also, welcome to July, the most wonderful time of the year where my phone goes off nonstop. It's going to be crazy. I have noticed, I would say in the last maybe like week or so, give or take, I'm having more people asking me like, hey, what are you hearing? Like, what do you got behind the scenes here in baseball? So it's going to end up being, we still have a lot of questions, but that being said, it's going to be pretty damn fun. Adam Weinrib, how are you?
I am good. I don't want to do a month off so early in the show, but what month would you take between July and December? Like if
July.
you had to pick, you take July.
Oh, 100%. Trade deadline. Yeah, it's my Christmas.
Okay. My Christmas is at Christmas, which also happens to be December. So I will pick the winter meetings personally. But again, I'm not you, and I get it because I think we're kicking up the dust here a little bit. The only thing if I were to, talk to a genie and say I have one wish for this year's trade deadline, it would be for a little more clarity, because I don't think we don't fully know the complete list of sellers. Buyers, it's at least 2/3 of Major League Baseball, and so that led me to pitch a couple of candidates who, hey, maybe started June. We thought these people were safe from being on the move. Now, not so much. I will do an ad read before we get into this, but I have some fun stuff, some fun quotes, and again, getting to your questions. But before we get into all that good stuff, DraftKings is still offering you a fantastic sign-up bonus for new users. Oh, and by the way, this is also good stuff, DraftKings. Don't get mad at me because I called your ad not good stuff. It is. It's very good stuff. New customers can place a $5 first bet on any sport to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets when you sign up with our code Baseball Insider. What's that? I'm fired? Okay, I get it. The best part is you'll receive your rewards even if your first bet loses. Using our code Baseball Insider not only gets you these bonuses, but it also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code Baseball Insider to maximize your first bets. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. And if you want to join us between shows, not a lot of time between shows this week with the Monday and Wednesday, but we welcome you in the Discord. You can either join at the Rumor Mill level, where you can ask Robert and I questions between shows, or at the All-Star level, same deal. Priority question responses in the stream. We go to you before the show and ask if you got questions. We also give you a private stream once a month where you can hang out with Robert and I and get access to ask you questions face to face. You don't need to turn your cameras on, but our faces are there and you can ask us questions. It's a good time. Shout out to the YouTube subscribers. You passed 2,000 this weekend. That's a good number of subscribers. Let's make it 2,500. Let's make it 3,000. Either way, we love all of you who are here already. Keep spreading the word.
Oh, we absolutely do. Watching this podcast grow has been one of the coolest things of my entire career. I mean, I started this with Carm a couple years ago, and I had no idea where this would go. And it's grown into this where we got people tuning in for deadline information. We got off-season discussion. We got Adam Weinrib here, who's absolutely killed it. We appreciate everyone, and this show will not disappoint. We got the good stuff. I know Adam's got some stuff that he wanted to bring up as well, and it's only going to get better from here. I'm going to tell you that right now. We're only just getting started, so we appreciate all of you. We want to make that abundantly clear.
Hell yeah, and we see you in the comments. Going to be going to all of you in a little bit, but I figured start this episode with a quote. Watched Sunday Night Baseball last night. David Cohn, discussing the Orioles and the Rangers and the state of the market, said, quote, "It's a seller's market, and there will be pain. So expect high prices this summer, according to David Cohn, and according to, I would say, logic and reason. But as we dive into this and all your player-specific and team-specific questions, from where you sit July 1st, agree or disagree, painful for buyers this summer with so much competition?
Oh, I 100% agree with that. Like it's going to end up being something I hear a lot about over the next month, and something we all end up hearing a lot about over the next month is there's so little clarity on the market and who's going to be available and who's not going to be available. And with so many teams hovering around that playoff contention mark, it could be a very limited option or a very limited number of sellers, which limits the options available on the market, which is only going to drive the prices up more and more. Like if you look at certain teams that are like clear sellers, like you look at the White Sox, the Marlins, the Angels, I mean, just to name a few, especially the White Sox, have some really good trade chips to sell, and they can end up getting a lot in return for players who maybe would get a lot, but also some players, they could end up maximizing them even more so than they once thought. So it's a good position for them to be in. And if I was a buyer, yeah, it's a bad time to be a minor league farm system. That's what I got to say about that, because it could end up getting more depleted.
Well, I'm
also obviously a burner. Get ready. We're about to talk about them.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple comments in here that I think some are earnest, some are meant sarcastically, but we're going to be addressing multiple comments that I don't think the original commenter thinks are going to get addressed on this show. That's a little teaser for you. Well, again, seller's market. If you are on the fence, a bad week might convince you to sell, given the amount of potential windfall there if you don't believe in your big league roster. And that has led to some players being less safe than I think we believed just a couple of short weeks ago. And I want to pinpoint 3 here. And I know we sort of, this is just me floating stuff. I think some of these are unlikely, again, but just names I wanted to highlight before we move into the more commonly tossed about names and questions from the crowd. And first is Cody Bellinger, because the Cubs feel like clear sellers every day. Cody Bellinger in that Montgomery Snell bucket of weird one-year adjacent contracts. The performance has not matched the offseason hype. The Cubs are somehow worse with Chris Counsell. I mean, maybe that's why they're so bad, because it's just some guy named Chris Counsell making $40 million. But they're worse with Craig at the helm than anyone believed. They're worse than they were with David Ross last year. The second half slide has continued, and it becomes less likely in my mind that they stick it out with Bellinger, especially given the complexity of his upcoming payday. What say you about Bellinger on the market? Safe or going to be explored?
I think we're at the point now where the Cubs have to explore it, because they're 39-46 and they're in last place in this division, and they are free fall is too strong, but it's not looking good for them. And they're in a kind of a similar position to the Blue Jays, where I think they can end up being in denial that they have to trade a guy, or that they should trade a guy like Cody Bellinger. But I think they have to be real with themselves. And if they end up getting an offer where they end up getting good value in return, then it's like, then I think they have to either explore it, consider it, or even pull the trigger on it. And it's an absolutely damning position for them to be in, because when they ended up hiring Craig Counsell, they thought he was going to end up bringing them to a different level than what David Ross previously did. And it's not all Counsell's fault. I've been pretty on the record about this, or I've said it numerous times on the show here, that it's a roster construction problem, and which that falls squarely on Jed Hoyer, because that is his job. The offense is in shambles. You look at the bullpen, especially, it's been a joke. They have to be real with themselves. And if they end up considering selling, you have a short-term player, or at least you have Bellinger, who signed to a short-term contract where you can get something in return for him. I think if you get the right offer, you got to explore it. So I don't necessarily think it's a guarantee that he's moved, but I think they have to be real with themselves and really consider this thing.
Are you sure it's not Chris Counsell's fault? Are you sure we can't put any blame on Chris Counsell?
Yeah, I think Chris I think he's safe, but Craig Counsell, I mean, yikes. We see that one picture of him going around all over Twitter. I mean, basically sums up the entire Cubs season in a nutshell. I mean, he just looks shell-shocked. It's just, no bueno.
No, whole team is in a nutshell right now. And I do think, Bellinger's not being explored significantly internally. He should be. Other two names just to float. We talked about the Rays pretty significantly last episode, but as obviously a burner has conceded. What about Brandon Lowe, who has rebounded somewhat like his teammates, but you are quick to note, the numbers aren't all there. Not everything matches the OPS plus. He's an underrated player, but maybe he doesn't shine through in the surface numbers, and has not yet ascended back to that 2021 MVP vote getting level. He's not that player, and he's nearing 30. But that, for me, is all the more reason to include him in that bucket of potentially tradable Rays as the team options loom in 25 and 26. Not that same escalating arbitration that a guy like Blake Snell had, but still kind of like hey, is he going to be a Ray at age 30 and 31? Maybe. Beyond that, feels like no way. So that's how I landed here. But what about Brandon Lowe, in your opinion?
I gave my answers in our rundown, and I might be changing my mind a little bit. Like, I don't do that. Usually like I stick to what I put down, but you look at this thing. I mean, he's a guy, his contract is 6 years for $24 million, which is extremely valuable. That's super cheap. I know his production hasn't been there. He's hitting 218 this year, and he hasn't hit over 235 since 2021. He's got 6 homers this year, but he's got a real strong. His background has been very good. He got MVP votes a few years ago, and you look at it. His contract ends, the guaranteed years in his contract end after this year, and then there are 2 club options for $10.5 million in 2025, and then $11.5 million in 2026. If you're the Rays, you probably aren't going to pick those up. At least as of right now, I can't imagine they're going to be in a spot where they pick those up. So does that make them more likely to trade him now so they can get something in return rather than lose him when they decline those options? That's just something that kind of came to my mind, makes me wonder. I think in the position that they're in, where they might end up being on the fence at the deadline, and they could take advantage of a seller's market, and they could put some of those pieces on the market. I think Brandon Lowe here, I think he makes a lot of sense as someone who they could try to move just so they can recoup something in return for him, because the way his production is now, I got to imagine they're probably going to end up declining those. So that's where I'm at right now. I think that was, I underestimated it at the time, but after more thought, I think the logic is absolutely there to potentially move him. So I tip my cap to you, Adam Weinrib. Good job.
There we go. I just think you should feel safe putting the Rays in whichever bucket the smartest teams are in. And if we are agreeing this is a seller's market, then I think the Rays are going to be playing around with the sellers more than we might have thought. And the Yankees have a unique opportunity here where every game, week, and series matter so much. They play the Rays next week. If it does not go well for Tampa, the Yankees could push their chips closer to the seller's pile. Or if the opposite happens and Tampa makes a statement against the Yankees, we could potentially see that swing and maybe send a couple of Yankees onto the trade market. And I give you Gleyber Torres, who Yankee fans will tell you it's impressive that this team is 22 games over 500 and where they are with 2 competent offensive players. A lot of people will put Anthony Volpe in that bucket. He's been powerless and not very competent since the beginning of June. Great defender, offense not there. And so the Yankees' future hinges on what happens to Alex Verdugo. Is Ben Rice a piece? What do they do at the deadline? DJ LeMahieu, is there anything left? Of all of these not unsure things, Giancarlo Stanton's injury recovery, Gleyber Torres should be providing stability for this team right now. He should be a 265, 270 bat with solid power, 780 OPS. Like, you should know what you're getting. And instead, the OPS is at a career low 650, 3 straight multi-hit games since being benched, and a home run in Friday night's win over Toronto. But that's not enough to erase what Yankee fans have seen so far. The Yankees almost traded Torres at the 2022 deadline. The rumor has it that he was in a Marlins deal that never materialized. he was never the same after learning about that at the end. He finished 2022 with a brutal August, rebounded in September because he learned about these rumors. All that to say, the Yankees are still in a playoff spot. The Yankees are going to be buying at the deadline, but Gleyber Torres benched for hustle or injury. Boone and Torres gave different answers on it a couple of days ago. I don't know, just checking to see what your sense is of his safety and security. This is a walk year for Gleyber Torres too.
It is a walk year, but the Yankees, they need depth offensively, and I can't imagine they're going to end up being in a hurry to move him, especially since he's having a down year. It's been one of the worst years of his career, if not the worst. He's hitting only 226 with 4 homers at this point, and got benched. Kind of just looks like a shell of himself, as you said. And if they weren't willing to pull the trigger on a deal, which I believe, if I remember the reports correctly, that would have gotten them Pablo Lopez in return. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Because I wanted to make sure I remember the reports correctly.
That's what we heard. So, I don't know if you heard anything differently, but that's what we heard.
I didn't hear anything contradicting at that point, but I don't have it 100% with conviction that it was Pablo Lopez. But that being said, if you're not going to move Torres at that point, then I think you are not going to move him now, even though he is in a walk year. I think he's going to end up being a really fascinating free agent. He's going to end up being a player that some team thinks, oh, we can get the most out of him, and could end up getting a bigger deal than maybe some would expect. So I don't expect him to be moved. I think the Yankees are going to hold on to him because, quite frankly, they need him. And what better way for him to go out than possibly being a postseason hero for him, but just emerges at the last second. Who knows? But also another point I wanted to make too is I think this was a really good observation by you, Adam, is teams are really they're careful with what exactly gets out in the media in terms of trade rumors or anything like that, because if a rumor like that gets out that the team is seriously considering trading them, that can have a serious impact on a player's his mindset and just everything that comes with that. Because I think oftentimes we forget that players are people, and they have families, they have homes, they have all sorts of different stuff, and they're very careful about that. I know I've held on to certain stuff so things don't get out. So because it's just you never know how something getting out can end up impacting a player. So I think that is just the latest example of that. I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that eventually gets out on whatever player in a trade rumor that's could end up impact. I'm going on a tangent here, but I think your last point was a really good reminder that these players are people, and we shouldn't forget that. But I don't expect Torres to be moved. Long story short, or long story long.
Long story could have been longer, though. Honestly, I think that's a valid reminder, especially this season. This time of the season, when you see Twitter just overrun with people being like, oh God, get this guy off my team. There's never been more get this guy off my teams, and that guy is a person. So we are happy to do the discourse here, but I don't think we're going to do a lot of, this guy's disgusting, this guy smells on the Baseball Insiders. I think that's
I smell. So
we can do beat writers smell. Obviously we'll.
I know who's number one on that list.
Well,
I think everyone else in baseball media would agree with me on that. But we're not going to get in on that. Adam, change the subject here.
I will. I'll happily change the subject because we have a couple other names to hit as well as some questions in the comment section. And the biggest name, be hard. We're not going to do every year. There's a name we can't ignore. This year, it's probably Garrett Crochet for now. And so that brings us to the latest on Crochet, the Incline commenting right on time to say that what we heard over the weekend, Bob Nightingale was the first, I believe, to report that when the White Sox long-term conversations with Garrett Crochet quickly evaporate. I don't know how quickly, but it sounds like they tried to pursue that path briefly. Didn't work out. At least the White Sox did not release a statement like the Clippers did, basically being like, hey, we love Paul George. There's a sizable gap. Okay, cool, Clippers. Nightingale did report that the Sox were quickly rebuffed on that extension. He is as good as gone at the deadline. And he also reported that the Dodgers tried and their offer was pretty quickly rejected. Now, having one offer get rejected is not the death knell for a trade connection. That just means the Dodgers weren't there yet, or the White Sox perceived Crochet's value at a different spot. And guess what? In this seller's market, the White Sox are not trading Garrett Crochet before July 1st. Spoiler alert. But what does what we know so far about Crochet's market tell us about how this might develop as he becomes potentially the most coveted player who changes places at this deadline?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. I think he's going to end up being perhaps like the top starting pitcher available. And which, if you would have told me that coming into the year, I would have been really surprised. I would have been shocked, honestly, because I remember even before opening day, I had someone text me and ask me, do you think Crochet is going to make the White Sox's rotation? And I wasn't totally sure of the answer on that because I don't think the White Sox really knew either. And then all of a sudden he was named their opening day starter, and he has just taken off to a level that I don't think anyone could have really seen coming. And with considering his contract right now, how controllable he is, there is going to be probably half of baseball that's in on Garrett Crochet. And it could end up being teams that are in the World Series race now. It could even be teams that are kind of on the fence because he's going to end up impacting your rotation for multiple years to come. And that is insanely valuable. So I think the White Sox here are absolutely in a position to take advantage of this, because if you look at it, what other top tier starting pitchers are going to be available? Like the Astros have said that they're not going to sell. Skubal, I highly doubt highly doubt is moved. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, Eric Fetty, I mean, that's another White Sox arm. So, I mean, they're also in a really good position there. There's just so much uncertainty with who is going to be available here at the deadline that the White Sox in numerous different ways are in position to really capitalize on it. And I think Crochet and his dominance and his emergence is going to be a really good thing for them. And they're going to take advantage of it. Chris Getz, I give him credit. Like this is going to end up being something that they can really, they're going to end up getting quite the haul in return for him. I don't know exactly how big it's going to be, but considering that this is such a seller's market, this is going to end up being a very big haul. And I fully anticipate Crochet being moved because it would be pretty foolish not to take advantage of a situation as good as this.
One thing I love about baseball is that most have not thought much about the White Sox and their hoarding of talent, et cetera, since early April. They've just been written off as like an also-ran of the 2024 MLB season. They're going to hold the reins at this deadline. They're going to control a lot of things because of some
absolutely.
of the talent that they have.
Yeah, totally. And another thing too is like you look at, like, as I said before, I mean, you're going to have these top contending teams that are in, like the Dodgers. They're clearly interested. I think the Orioles make a ton of sense here because, quite frankly, I mean, look at their rotation. They could absolutely use another arm, and he'd be controllable. And he's young enough too, where I mean, they can build around him even more. I've mentioned the Brewers previously as a potential fit, and I stand by that. But I think it makes more sense on paper than it does in reality because I think the Brewers are going to be shopping in a different aisle. But I fully expect them to at least check in because, I mean, that's what you got to do. But I think the Brewers probably end up looking elsewhere. And, I mean, I mentioned it before on the previous podcast that their defense can allow them to be creative with the kind of options they add in Milwaukee. So I think that's something to note. And I also thought that Will Salmon put it really well in his story with The Athletic today, that the Brewers are going to be more relying on internal options than external. They're going to be looking externally for pitching help for sure, but it's not a case where all their answers are going to be external. They're more going to come from the internal side. So I think that was well said by him. Drew, I'm seeing you constantly asking for Padres news. I will give it to you. Bullpen help is something that they're looking at right now. Yeah, and I think rotation, I think they could use at least two starters there, but nothing new there.
Yeah, I'm not bummed the Padres are good. That's not the right way to put it, but I really liked Joel Sherman's idea a couple weeks ago of the Yankees taking Suarez's contract because of Estrada's emergence and maybe, we're able to pull something, get rid of this future commitment, help the Padres buy and sell. And now the Padres are too good. It's never going to happen. But they are obviously looking to beef up that bullpen because that's an actual wild card team instead of a pretender wild card team.
No, absolutely. Like with AJ Preller, I mean, a couple weeks ago, they were in a weird spot. I mean, you could have expected him to do, whatever. Like with Preller, you can never rule anything out. But now that they're bouncing back, that they're in position here, money is a question for them right now. But you can never rule out AJ Preller with anything because he's about as creative as it gets. Yeah, and also like Michael Carrillo, might be mispronouncing that. Kenley Jensen was a name that the Padres discussed before the season. I remember I teased the Jarren Duran thing. The Padres discussed Jarren Duran and Jensen with the Red Sox before the season. Nothing ever ended up happening of it. But I mean, considering their interest before the season started, you got to imagine that they'll at least poke around with that idea again.
Be nice if that trade had gone down for some people on this podcast, not all. One more team that I want to mention before we open it up to a few more questions is just the Mariners, because Jerry Dipoto has sort of gone on the record, and usually when the Mariners go on the record, it's to say something weird, like we're trying to win 52% of our games or whatever. This time, he's on the record saying he plans to be aggressive to upgrade this offense, which is what needs to be upgraded, because the Mariners are half a World Series team and half a last place team in the AL West right now, borderline. So we know Dipoto likes to trade. Dipoto has a great opportunity ahead of him right now. You never know how large that window really is. We've seen pitchers go down before. Brian Wu already has several times. Any idea which avenues he is eyeing to fine-tune his currently first place, but barely fending off the best record in baseball in June, Astros, his Mariners?
Yeah, the Mariner, like it's Jerry Dipoto is basically the AL version of what AJ Preller is. And It's funny that they share a spring training complex together over here in Peoria. Because I mean, I don't know how often those guys talk, but I would love to know what those kind of conversations look like. But I fully anticipate the Mariners being aggressive here, as Jerry Dipoto alluded to, and that means exploring all the big options that are out there. And it's just a question of who's exactly going to be out there, because you look at it with the Blue Jays, I still don't believe they're going to be trading Vlad Jr. or Bo Bichette, so you can rule them out for now at least. You look at the White Sox with Luis Robert Jr., I think that makes plenty of sense, and I would fully anticipate the Mariners checking in there. Then after that, like maybe it's Josh Bell with the Marlins. That's just another option that's out there. After that, it's just a giant question mark. But Dipoto, you can expect the unexpected with him in terms of what his history suggests, because he's made moves that I don't think anyone really saw coming, and made moves to acquire players that, frankly, like not many people knew were available. So this year is going to require him to be really creative in exploring and trying to find those upgrades. But those offensive upgrades need to happen, especially with that rotation looking as good as it is. So we'll see there, but I fully anticipate the Mariners upgrading their offense and possibly in a pretty meaningful way. Pete Alonso is getting a mention here by Mark Carrillo. Yeah. If we look at it right now, the Mets are one game under 500. It's just a weird spot for them to be in. We don't know exactly if he'll be available or not, but you would expect that phone call to at least be made. So we'll see there. But I think the Mariners are going to be one of the more aggressive teams here at the deadline, especially looking for offense, because quite frankly, they need it. And with how good their young pitching staff is, trying to really maximize this window of like maximizing that pitching staff, I think is a really good idea. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and something tells me that the Mariners did call about Alonso today. It would be a lot like the Garrett Crochet Dodgers conversation of it is July 1st. Click. But in this seller's market, look, we already had a whole offseason of teams waiting and playing chicken and staring down top free agents, getting stared back at. Sellers are going to take advantage of this market. If you move quickly before competition really bubbles up this year, I'm not sure what you're doing. I mean, obviously, some teams want to strike quickly, overpay in order to get players in the building sooner, and maybe put some distance between them and the rest of a crowded wildcard field. But you're going to have to overpay if you're going to do that.
Yeah, and that's exactly something. I'm glad you mentioned this, because I thought about it earlier in the show and I forgot about it. But I've had two executives with teams who are in position to buy tell me that they're really surprised that there's teams that are in like clear sell mode that haven't been bringing their asking prices down to a more realistic level, so they can end up like selling off these players sooner rather than later, and also getting a little bit more in return, especially for the rentals. Or even controllable guys too, because they would position themselves as the one, or whoever could potentially decide to sell right now could end up really separating themselves and being like the only true seller out there at this point of the season. And they could end up really taking advantage of that and getting more in return. But also, like, I mean, just because asking prices, at least as of this point, are just unrealistic. There's so many teams that do not have a sense of clear direction. And we don't know of hardly anyone who's available at this point. And it's just it's surprised some folks that there's just been one of those teams, or like the White Sox or the Angels or the Marlins or whoever, haven't been more like, hey, let's make a deal now and get this thing done. Because it's a huge waiting game, at least as of this point. I think the comments here, by the way, are really, they're well said. I think Jack Flaherty is absolutely somebody who is going to be one of the top options available. The Rangers could really make themselves a fascinating deadline option here. I mean, they got Scherzer. I mean, I don't know if that's a realistic thing. I mean, DeGrom is under contract as well, but that's a really hard one to trade, especially considering he's coming off the injury and having, a 5-year deal that he ended up signing there. Nathan Eovaldi is an interesting one, though. I think he could end up being an under the radar option. Honestly, it's a good shout. I had not thought about that, but he could end up being somebody who can make a real difference. And he's also got the playoff pedigree as well. He was a huge influence last year in the Rangers' World Series run. And for a team that is trying to compete this year for a World Series, seeing what he did there and also in Boston, it's a pretty good thing. I like that. That's a good shot by the Comets there. Good job, guys.
Yeah, I liked reading it. I wish I'd thought of that and moved Eovaldi up to the front of the show. But
I legit am going to write about that after this show. This is like, you guys just gave me my content for the day. I'm not dismissing anything, Drew. I don't want to get your hopes up. I'm just kind of in wait and see. I'm kind of skeptical that Scherzer would be moved, but we'll see. But I'm not trying to dismiss anything.
Of course. Well, we do what we can here. I think it's a funny. This is the sentiment.
I'm not trying to not dismiss. That's what I mean.
No. Of course. I mean, this is the sentiment of the show. Like, I think there are a lot of fans of mediocre 500 teams that want their team to buy, but in reality, their team should sell. Also, there are a couple of teams like the Red Sox specifically jump out. They're getting scolded by the national media again for like, hey, this is a team to believe in. If you don't go for it now, when would you ever go for it? Pretty solid counter to Red Sox fans who are like, the media hates me. The media is begging you to buy and get better. So obviously the media does not hate you. But I think it's funny to see that there was a comment earlier in the show from Jason that was like, Breslow being adamant they need to pick a lane when this is maybe the most buy-sell year ever. I guess, but I do think I think picking a lane for me, for the Red Sox, for teams like that, it's about taking a strong stance and believing in the roster more so than it is saying we won't sell at all. Like, I think the Red Sox could put their, fork in the ground and be like, we're buyers. We're improving this team. We're going for a playoff spot, and still trade Kenley Jansen. Like, I don't think that's disqualifying. Maybe an odd take, but I think Breslow and people who are saying we need to pick a lane or whatever are more declaring just motivations rather than saying we're not going to be selling any pieces. They're going to do what's in the best interest of this year's team and the future, but they're either going to prioritize this year's roster or the future.
Oh, absolutely. And like they can do a mix of both. And but if they ended up trading Kenley Jansen and upgrading a different, because they would save a good amount of money off the payroll by trading Jansen, which they could end up putting all in to the roster now, or even they could use the money saved from Jansen and also some additional money to pour into the roster for this year. I think it's something that they should absolutely explore. And as you said, the national media does not hate the Red Sox. We want them to go all in. We're pushing the ownership to do that. And we hope that they listen, because baseball, quite frankly, is more fun when the Red Sox are contending, and you have those big Yankees Red Sox games in the late regular season or even in the postseason. Like, that is great baseball. It's a great thing for baseball. So I'm hoping the Red Sox, and specifically ownership, because this falls squarely on ownership, that they buy and they are aggressive in trying to upgrade this roster. Because if they aren't, that is just the latest example of this ownership group being pretty poor about pouring resources into this roster. And that just should never be a question with the Red Sox.
Well, and there's a chance that the Yankees and Red Sox could match up in the postseason this year. I think Major League Baseball and the media in general probably wants that to happen if there's a shot. I don't, but I'm not the whole national media. So,
but you're a big part of it, though.
I am actually the kingpin that leads the media discourse. I mean, hey, maybe the comment section is these days, considering you all just gave Robert an idea for an Nathan Eovaldi column. That's why we are thankful for you all. We'd love to see some of you in the Discord to talk to us between shows. But either way, thanks for showing up today. Hope to see you again Wednesday. Earlier in the day, that's going to be 1 o'clock Eastern, I believe. So we will see you all. Let me just get you. Yeah, that's 1 ET on Wednesday. You'll have a podcast right here. If you're subscribed, turn on that alarm bell, get those notifications ready. We'll see you right back here less than 48 hours from now to give you another update deadline primer before heading into the holiday weekend. Then we'll see you again Monday. And I think we're trying to plan that All-Stars private stream for next Tuesday, the 9th. In the evening, we'll settle on a time, give you all the link if you join that All-Stars channel. Either way, I know that was a mouthful of scheduling. Thanks for joining us. And Robert Murray, thank you for joining us, as always.
Hey, thank you for having me. Great show today. Very active comment section, which we also love. And we'll see everyone back here on Wednesday for a special edition of the Baseball Insiders. And a Weinrib, I appreciate you doing the show with me. Wouldn't be possible without you. And see you on Wednesday.
See you on Wednesday, right here. Same place. Turn on those noties. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.